What's the most horrifying crime documentary you've ever watched? He looked like the safest man on the block. Steady job, quiet smile, two little kids who sprinted to the door when he came home. That's why the silence felt so wrong. One morning, messages went unanswered. Not busy, unanswered. Gone, unanswered. A friend tried calling, then drove over, heart racing faster than logic. When police arrived, he greeted them like a helpful husband, calm voice, polite nods. But his eyes kept sliding away, as if the answers were hiding in the corners. Inside, the house was too neat, too still. No shoes kicked off, no chatter, no kids' noise, just air that felt staged. Next door, a neighbor pulled up security footage. The driveway appeared ordinary until you watched the timing, a normal routine, with one missing piece that didn't fit the story he was telling. Standing shoulder to shoulder with officers, he watched the video like a man watching his own mask crack. He spoke faster, added details, corrected himself, patched one lie with another, and the scariest part wasn't what the camera showed, it was what it didn't. The people who should have been there, erased. In that bright living room, the truth finally landed. This wasn't an intruder story. The danger had been inside the whole time, smiling in daylight. Next story. The footage didn't look like a horror story at first. It looked like a celebration. Cameras, staff smiling politely, a famous man moving through a children's hospital as if he owned the hallway. He joked, he grinned, he performed kindness the way some people perform on stage. Nothing openly dangerous, nothing you could point at and scream, but the atmosphere felt off. The laughter was too careful. The adults hovered the way people hover around something they don't want to name. Then the documentary paused on something small, a child's drawing, not a friendly portrait, something darker, a monster. When he noticed it, he laughed like it was cute, like it was harmless, like it was nothing. He leaned in with that practiced charm and asked, "What did I ever do to you?" Expecting the room to follow his lead, expecting the moment to dissolve into awkward chuckles. But the child didn't laugh. The child didn't hesitate. The answer came flat, simple, and terrifying in its certainty. Everything. That single word changed the whole scene. Suddenly the smile on screen felt like camouflage. The friendly banter felt like a cover. And the worst part was realizing the truth wasn't hidden. It had been there the entire time, visible to the people standing closest, who kept smiling anyway. Next story. From the beginning, it feels like a ticking clock, because the warning signs aren't subtle. A little boy appears again and again with injuries that don't match the explanations. Each time there's a pause where someone could stop it. Each time the story tries to smooth itself over. Excuses, paperwork, we'll follow up, we'll check again. The tension builds because you can see the pattern forming, and the people with power keep treating it like isolated incidents instead of a single escalating emergency. Behind the official notes and polite conversations, danger sits where it always sits, in a home with closed doors. Then the detail that hits hardest. He once wrote a letter as a school assignment, telling his mother he loved her. Not a complaint, not a cry for help. Just a child trying to earn love by offering love first. Reading it feels like watching someone reach for a hand that never reaches back. That innocence sharpens everything, every delay, every missed report, every moment someone decided it wasn't bad enough yet. The suspense isn't in a chase. It's in the helpless waiting, watching the system move slowly while the harm moves fast. And when the truth finally arrives, it doesn't feel like a reveal. It feels like the end of a countdown that should have been stopped 100 times before it hit zero. Next story. It starts with the kind of discomfort people ignore. An adult who lingers too long, too friendly, too involved. At first, it's easy to rationalize. He's just helpful. He's just close to the family. And then the line moves. A girl disappears, returns, and everyone exhales like the nightmare is over. But the relief doesn't last. Because the real terror isn't only what he did, it's how he did it. By stepping into the family itself like he belonged there. The story becomes maddening because every time you expect the adults to slam the door, they hesitate. Every time you expect the system to draw a hard boundary, it drifts. The predator doesn't need to break in. He's invited close, allowed to speak, allowed to explain, allowed to linger just long enough to tighten his grip again. The documentary tension grows from the audacity of it, how he keeps circling back, how he keeps finding cracks, how the people who should protect her become confused, compromised, manipulated into silence and inaction. When it happens again, when she's abducted a second time, the horror feels unreal. Not because the crime is unbelievable, but because the warnings were everywhere. It plays like a slow-motion crash where you're screaming at the screen, watching the same fatal mistakes repeat, and you're left with one question that won't let go. How did the same nightmare get a second chance inside the same family? Next story. The title feels like a confession. The truth wasn't hidden in shadows. It sat in the living room, smiling at the adults who thought they were in control. A family friend becomes a familiar presence, helpful, charming, always nearby. He earns trust the way predators often do, slowly, patiently, through routine. The warning signs don't arrive as alarms. They arrive as small, weird moments people brush aside to avoid conflict. Then the story turns, and turns again, because the man doesn't only target the child, he targets the parent's judgment. He divides them, distracts them, tangles them emotionally until the household feels foggy and uncertain. The tension builds in the worst way. You can see the trap tightening, but the family keeps stepping into it, convinced that this time will be different, that we understand now, that it can't happen again. But predators thrive on second chances. They thrive on politeness. They thrive on people not wanting to believe the unthinkable. Each delay becomes another opening, each conversation another thread he uses to pull himself closer. The suspense isn't a single twist. It's the rising dread of watching trust become the weapon. By the end, what haunts you isn't just what he did, it's how ordinary it looked while it was happening. Evil wearing a friendly face, sitting at the table, blending into normal life until normal life no longer exists. Next story. At first, it feels like love trying to hold itself together. Photographs, stories, warm memories arranged carefully, as if the film itself is a lifeline. You think you're watching a tribute, painful, yes, but safe in the way grief stories usually are. Then you realize something colder is moving underneath. This isn't only about loss. It's about what comes after loss. When decisions, systems, and loopholes become part of the danger, the suspense grows because the people left behind don't sit quietly. They fight. They document, they call, they push, they do everything you're supposed to do when something feels wrong. And that's what makes it unbearable, watching responsible, loving people do the right things and still feel time slipping through their fingers. Every meeting and deadline feels like a door that might close forever. The film tightens around hope, the belief that if you love hard enough and prove the facts clearly enough, justice will respond. You're pulled along by that hope, clinging to it. And then the story delivers its turns, not like a thriller twist, but like gravity suddenly dropping. By the end, the suspense isn't what happens next. The suspense is, please, let this stop in time. And when it doesn't, the shock isn't only horror. It's the devastating realization that sometimes the world fails people even when they're screaming. Next story. It starts with a video online. Something so disturbing you feel your stomach drop, like your body knows before your mind fully processes it. The internet does what it always does, watches, reacts, shares. But a few strangers refuse to be spectators. They become investigators, turning a screen into a crime scene. They zoom in on reflections. They listen for background sounds. They track tiny details the way detectives track footprints. The suspense hits immediately. If they can find him fast enough, maybe they can stop what's coming next. But the man they're chasing isn't hiding. He's performing. He wants attention, and attention pours in like fuel. Every clue feels like progress, until he slips away again, always one step ahead, always feeding off the chaos. The investigators are trapped in a brutal paradox. To stop him, they must watch. By watching, they risk giving him exactly what he craves. The hunt spreads across borders, false leads, near misses, names that almost fit, accounts that vanish. Each update makes you wonder who is real and who is pretending. The documentary tightens the leash until it feels like you're part of the chase, refreshing, scanning, waiting for the next drop. And the scariest modern fear settles in. Evil can broadcast itself in real time, and the world can't look away fast enough to stop it. By the time the truth surfaces, the question isn't, how did he do it? It's, how many people were watching while he did? Next story. There are no bars, no locked doors you can see. From the outside, it can look like strict faith, tradition, order. From the inside, it's a machine that runs on obedience and fear. Rules tighten quietly, one small restriction at a time, until the rules become reality and reality becomes a cage. The leader's voice replaces your inner voice. The community becomes your entire world, and leaving doesn't just mean walking away, it means losing everything you've ever been told is safe. The suspense builds in steps because control never announces itself loudly at first. It starts as guidance, then it becomes expectation, then it becomes punishment disguised as correction. People learn to smile even when they're breaking inside because the title's instruction, keep sweet, isn't kindness. It's a command to appear fine no matter what's happening. As the story unfolds, you feel tension between belief and reality. Some speak in calm certainty while the cracks widen. Others begin to wake up, and waking up is dangerous. Doubt becomes a sin. Questions become betrayal. And the leader's power grows strongest where silence grows deepest. Each interview feels like a door opening, but behind every open door is another locked room. What was hidden, what was normalized, what was excused for years. The suspense isn't whether something terrible happened, it's whether anyone can say it out loud and survive the backlash. And when voices finally break through, the fear doesn't disappear. It shifts, because now the community isn't a shelter, it's a wall closing in. Next story. It begins as a whisper that refuses to die. Old memories, buried fear, a name people avoid saying in full. A beloved figure is gone, and the official story feels too clean, too final, too convenient. The documentary opens that sealed room slowly, like someone turning a key that hasn't been used in years. Survivors and investigators pull at threads, and each thread leads to another door, another institution, another person with influence, another reason the truth might have been buried on purpose. The suspense is relentless because it isn't about one dramatic clue, it's about accumulation, one testimony, then another, then another. People describe speaking up and being dismissed. They describe pressure to stay quiet, pressure to move on, pressure that feels like a hand over the mouth. And hovering over everything is a familiar shadow, power protecting itself with silence, respectability, and intimidation. What makes it gripping is the emotional detective work, the courage it takes to revisit trauma, to name what happened when naming it once brought consequences. Small details begin to align and you feel the pattern forming. Not a masked figure lurking behind a door, but something broader and colder. A system that can absorb harm and still look respectable from the outside. By the end, the tension doesn't resolve neatly. It leaves you with an unsettling question. If survivors can speak clearly and still not be heard, how many people had to look away for the harm to continue? And how many are still looking away now? Next story. A community is hit by a shocking crime, and fear floods every street like bad weather. People want answers immediately, not later, not after careful thinking, not after slow evidence. Now, the pressure builds like a storm. Rumors swirl, suspicion sharpens, and the need to believe the nightmare can be contained becomes almost desperate. The documentary tension comes from watching a case form in real time, watching how quickly maybe turns into definitely when a town is terrified and looking for someone to blame. Interviews feel heavy. Grief sits in the background of every sentence. Officials face demands for certainty. Neighbors talk like they're trying to convince themselves. Outsiders observe with uneasy questions. Are they following evidence or following a story the town has already decided to tell? Pieces of information appear, get interpreted, reinterpreted, repeated, until repetition starts sounding like proof. Each time a detail is stated with confidence, the suspense tightens, because confidence doesn't always mean truth. Meanwhile, lives hang in the balance, and the machinery of accusation grinds forward. The most unsettling part is how ordinary everything looks on the surface. Schools, quiet homes, familiar faces, while behind closed doors, decisions are being made that can't be undone. It becomes a thriller about certainty, how fast a community can decide what it believes, and how terrifying it is when belief outruns facts. And once belief becomes a verdict, it doesn't easily let go. Next story. Imagine a world where the people who committed mass violence don't hide. They sit openly, laugh, tell stories, and call themselves heroes. That's the first jolt, realizing the danger isn't a fugitive in the dark, but a society that has made room for cruelty and called it victory. The documentary becomes suspenseful in a strange, stomach-tightening way. You're not watching a man being hunted. You're watching men reenact their own crimes like they're filming an action movie. At first, it feels like bragging. They pose, they direct scenes, they treat horror like entertainment, and then something starts to crack. The more they perform, the more reality leaks through the costume. A pause lasts too long, a laugh sounds forced, a face changes for half a second and then snaps back into a smile. It's as if the body remembers what the mouth refuses to admit. The tension becomes, will conscience show up? Will truth break through even briefly? But there's no guarantee it will. The film doesn't promise redemption, it dares you to watch denial when denial is rewarded. And that's the haunting part, seeing how storytelling can become a shield for evil. The ending doesn't wrap up neatly. It leaves you with a cold awareness. Some horrors don't stay buried because the perpetrators are powerful. They stay alive because people keep calling them something else. Next story. It begins like an ordinary day. Plans, a drive, the casual confidence that the road is routine. Then everything breaks, and the story becomes a question that won't stop echoing. How did this happen? The documentary tension comes from contradiction. Evidence points one way, the family's belief points another, and the gap between those two realities becomes the battlefield. Those who loved her can't accept the implications, so they reach for alternatives. A medical emergency, a misunderstanding, bad timing, anything that preserves the person they thought they knew. The film unfolds like a puzzle where every piece is sharp enough to cut. Timelines, phone calls, decisions made in moments that now look terrifying in hindsight. Each new detail forces you to reevaluate the last. Was there a warning sign? Did someone sense something was off? Could a single different choice have broken the chain? What makes it so disturbing is the banality. No masked intruder, no hidden dungeon. Just a highway, a vehicle, and the fragile truth that someone's private struggle or private secret can become public tragedy in minutes. The suspense doesn't come from guessing the ending. It comes from watching people fight the ending. Even when the evidence feels heavy, the human heart resists. And that resistance becomes its own kind of horror, because if people can't face the truth, they can't learn from it. The story leaves you unsettled, not with closure, but with doubt that clings like fog. Next story. The story moves like a searchlight through fog. Survivors and community members trying to uncover what happened at a residential school where children were taken from their families and later reports described deep abuse. The suspense isn't built around one villain hiding in a corner. It's built around silence. Silence that lasted decades. Records missing. Stories ignored. Nothing to see here. Repeated so long it became policy. The documentary follows people who refuse to accept that. Each interview feels like opening a sealed envelope that's been locked away for years. A small detail becomes a thread. The thread leads to another cabinet, another archive, another institutional wall. The tension rises because truth here is not just painful, it's contested. Survivors speak, and they're met with bureaucracy, hesitation, sometimes the quiet pressure to stop digging. But they keep going. Not for drama, not for revenge, but for dignity. Names matter, acknowledgement matters, accountability matters. The suspense sits in the process. Will documents finally confirm what survivors already know in their bones? Will anyone in power admit it clearly, without excuses? Every step forward feels earned, and that makes it gripping. Because for the people telling these stories, the past isn't history. It's a wound that never got treated. The ending doesn't feel like a finish line. It feels like a door finally cracking open, letting in air that's still cold, but real. And once the air is real, silence can't pretend it's safety anymore. Next story. It was supposed to be an ordinary day outdoors. Quiet, familiar, the kind of trip that clears your head. Then the earth gave up a secret. No dramatic soundtrack, no perfect reveal. Just a sickening discovery that didn't belong in the landscape. The moment changes everything. Because once you see something like that, the world never quite looks the same again. Later, when the case appeared on television, the shock hit twice. A face on the screen matched the reality found in the dirt. A vibrant young woman reduced to a headline and a memory. The killer's name was already known by the time it reached the news. History had labeled him, but knowing the label didn't make it feel distant. It made it feel personal. The suspense here isn't, will he be caught? It's psychological suspense. How normal life can brush against horror without warning. One moment you're thinking about the weather, the trail, the day ahead. The next, you're standing at the edge of something so dark it rewrites your sense of safety. After that, every detail you learn becomes heavier. Where she was last seen, how easily she was taken, how casually she was discarded. The fear doesn't end with the discovery. It follows you home. It echoes in quiet moments because now you understand something most people never want to understand. Monsters don't always feel like monsters from far away. Sometimes you meet their aftermath under an ordinary sky in an ordinary place, and it leaves a permanent shadow. Next story. In the living room, everything almost looks normal. Neighbors gathered, police standing with notebooks, the husband talking like he's trying to help. But the house has a strange quiet, the kind that makes your skin notice the air. Family photos sit on the walls like proof of a life that should be loud, and yet, nothing. No children's sounds, no movement upstairs, just stillness pretending to be calm. Then the eerie moment happens. The TV plays a creepy promo in the background, something that feels ripped from a horror movie. For a second, nobody treats it like anything. It's just noise. But it lands perfectly in the wrong moment, like the room itself is flashing a warning sign. The husband glances at the screen, then back at the officers, and you can feel the pressure rise. Because now every word matters, every pause matters. Outside, the neighbor's security footage becomes a silent witness. Timing, movements, a normal routine that doesn't match the story. Inside, the husband starts talking more, adding details, correcting himself, stitching explanations together like he can sew the truth shut. But the more he speaks, the more the mask slips. The suspense isn't a chase, it's a tightening circle. Everyone is watching him, and he knows it. The house is quiet, the video is playing, the questions keep coming, and you can almost hear the truth pushing against his throat. In that ordinary living room, reality feels like it tilts. just enough to show what's hiding behind the normal face.